Thursday, that means our end-of-week panel to mull over events of the past few days. So much mulling to do. I'm joined tonight by Investor Director Andrew Brown and regular commentator Adam Schwab. Adam, who's up from Melbourne. We've got you in the studio for once. Welcome to you both. You'll be shocked to know I'm going to ask you your opinion on Greece. You know, I didn't want to be was it a Greek Cassandra? I wasn't meaning to be a Cassandra saying the end of the world was coming, but while it's good news, you know, I must say I have a feeling there's a lot of other hurdles to jump. It's just the first hurdle we're over, isn't it?
I think it is, Janine. To be honest, if you look at what's actually taken place, it's just a deferment of what I think will be the inevitable, which is that the European bank holders of about $50 billion worth of Greek government securities will have to take a haircut at some stage. The other issue with Greece, by the way, which is not talked about very often, is the fact that there's a lot of credit default swaps, remember them, insurance against default. Most of those, of course, are held by American banks or have been written by American banks, and so they lose out as well if Greece actually defaults. So that's really why people have been a little bit more worried, perhaps, than I portrayed on this program last week. It's the contagion effect, but I still don't believe in general terms it's actually that big a thing. OK, well, good. You're right so far. Adam, do you lose sleep over it? Do you think this is just the tip of the iceberg?
Not losing. Andrew's completely correct. The Greek issue is not going to be solved by an extension of a loan. It's the reasons are obvious. The IMF and the European Union don't care about the Greeks. They care about the French and German banks. They're on the hock for $40 or $50 billion to Greece. So, and that casts doubt over the solvency of their financial system. So that's the fact that it's Greece. Could be Greece, could be Spain, could be Italy, could be Ireland.
We haven't heard the last of them, have we? We haven't heard I mean, I would be prepared to bet that we will hear more of the Greek debt crisis, won't you?
Absolutely, because the fact is that they won't take their medicine.
Well, it hasn't been resolved. It's been kicked down.
Kick the can down the
Somebody used the analogy last Thursday on your show, which was Andrew or one of the other panellists, but it's been, you don't solve having too much debt by adding more debt. That's what's been happening in Ireland.
That's what sensible people like you say, Adam. I don't know why central bankers. I mean, we should have all run for the IMF president. That's a good one. There's a new one this week. I'm encouraged by a woman running it after the last incumbent.
Fascinating to know, Janine. The best film I saw last year is called Inside Job.
It
which is
about one of our
absolutely about the global financial crisis.
And she starred one of only 2 women in it.
Correct. And I think the 2 highest profile establishment figures in it were Dominique Strauss-Kahn and Christine Lagarde.
I thought she was much better. Did you see? Are you encouraged by her? She's an impressive woman.
I think she seems. I think I read today that she wore leather pants to a Baker McKenzie board meeting, which was a highlight. But I think the Inside Job,
she will not cause them embarrassment. There'll be no sexual scandals.
It wasn't embarrassing. I think that's a positive. But the Inside Job, the highlight had to be I think it was the commentator just interrogating I think it was the Columbia University economist or Yale economist, and anybody who hasn't seen Inside Job strongly suggest...
Well, let's get to Inside Job. That's actually a good segue to forget Greece. The biggie coming is the US. Much greater debt, much bigger problems for us. I mean, sense would say that the Republicans will come to the party at the last minute, will have a lot of posturing, they'll lift the debt ceiling. I mean, it's like a bank when your bank manager says no more money. I mean, it's pretty serious. I was talking to someone today who said there's real fear, there's $30 billion in bonds coming due and there's a fear of default. I mean, the thought of this happening in the US is beyond comprehension, but how serious is it?
Let's try and put it in context. Depending on whose numbers you believe, Greece has about $200 billion worth of total debt. It is a $300 billion economy. In the US, we have a debt ceiling stuck at $14.6 trillion, racking up at $1.4 trillion a year, which it's done each of the last 3 years, including this year. And that, funnily enough, is the size of the US economy. It's basically about a 14 to 15 trillion US dollar economy. So you've got debt to the total economy of 100%. And it's the world's largest economy.
So we're reason to worry.
Absolutely.
And Adam, do you think, I mean, we'll obviously see the same kind of stories and build up until then. How worried are you about the US, seeing as you're not losing sleep over Greece?
Oh, I'm far more concerned about the US than Greece. The US has the advantage of being able to print currency, which they've already done. And there's a school of thought that raises the prospect that the reason that Bernanke has been so quick to push the QE levers twice is because they can't get the bonds away any other way. If the US government wasn't buying its own bonds, who would be? I wouldn't be buying US government bonds despite the the propensity for low rates over there at the moment.
It's a really interesting point you say about them printing their own money, which they say is part of the Greece. When people ask, oh, why does being in the euro affect them? It's because, well, effectively, they can't print their own money. They're in the euro. But there was an interesting comment. We've had people on this show say, I'll just go back to the drachma, it'll be fine. The Greek finance minister said to him yesterday before the vote, just to let you know, if we go back to the drachma, I'll have to have tanks outside the banks while people go in to try and grab their currency. And I mean, it's not that simple. So that was a good point about the currency. Not that we're going to have tanks at the US banks. But do we assume that the Republicans will see sense in the end, or again, suicide bombing in an effort to try and win next November?
I think there's been. I think the US debt ceiling's been raised, maybe, Andrew, 100 times. It's raised every year. It's raised a couple of times. So I don't think this is. I think it's a bit of political posturing. But the US has some pretty serious. The 14.6 trillion doesn't cover a lot of contingent liability. There's Medicare, Medicaid. There's quite a lot of liabilities that aren't on that balance sheet. There's a lot of off-balance sheet.
So it's a good point. They will raise it, but when you don't want to raise taxes and you don't want to cut spending, how the hell are you going to get the money?
Print it. It's as simple as that. You have to print it. But don't forget the timing of all this that's going on. We're starting to move towards US elections 2012. The Republicans are trying to get organised in terms of who's actually going to run that's got any credibility as well. So I think that's going to be going on quite a bit over the next 5 weeks, as well as, you know, the actual negotiations, if I can call them that.
Let's get to Australia and politics. And as Adam, as you so nicely said before you came on, it would be the Perrett Show without the mining tax. It wasn't me that brought out that report this week. It wasn't me that told Bob Brown to go and make his provocative comments. What do we make of the latest? I mean, not a surprise that a coalition-led committee said scrap it, but it's looking a bit shaky again, the whole thing, isn't it?
Oscar Matthias Coleman was on your show last night, and he peddles the same sort of Abbott tune. And I've been a sort of conservative voter my whole life, but since the Howard years, the roles have almost reversed in federal politics, where Labor's been far more economically responsible, and the Liberal Party have almost completely lost the plot, especially in the last years of the Howard government.
Do you think we will get a mining tax?
I think we probably will. I think the original form of the mining tax, as we discussed last year, was a disaster because it effectively subsidised poorly performing mines.
But this push by Bob Brown to go for more seems ridiculous, but that's how he blew up an ETS. So, I mean, they do seem to have an odd attitude to it, don't they?
Yeah, I think the Greens will push as far as they can, but some sort of mining tax probably is warranted. I think that the mining industry themselves wanted a shake-up last year. That's what almost pushed the whole thing. And obviously BHP, Rio and Xstrata are on board, and they're the ones who are paying the vast majority of the tax.
Andrew, I'm totally with Adam on this, but I'm not sure the rest of the market is.
We will get the MRRT pretty much, I think, unchanged, because don't forget, it's been basically agreed by big mining. It's really 3 or 4 major companies that are paying it. It's across a small range of commodities where the miners are actually earning outsized returns on capital. Okay? The previous proposed tax clearly was going to kill the exploration sector, and that's why it had to go.
Okay.